And welcome to The Bottom Line, where we unpack some of the main business and economic stories of the day. 2024 has presented its economic challenges in our neck of the woods. The new year, just around the corner, may simply mean that there are only more challenges on the way and that each country must get its act together domestically, but also together as Europe. To understand what awaits our region and what each country's priorities are, I'm joined by Katarzyna Rzentarzewska, Chief CEE Macro Analyst from Erste Group. Hello, and thank you very much for joining us in the studio this time.
Good evening. Thank you for the invitation.
So our region and Europe in general is on the cusp of some significant developments. In January 2025, we know that Trump is going to take over the White House. Poland is taking on the EU presidency. Europe is taking some significant strides to move away from Russian gas. And we also aren't entirely sure where the EU stands in terms of the Mercosur trade deal. It's very unclear. Can you tell us a little bit about where Europe stands in regards to its recovery from an economic point of view versus the uncertainty and volatility in 2025?
The risks and uncertainties have been definitely mounting. We have seen that. At the beginning of 2024, we have been hoping for much more dynamic recovery, not only in Europe, but also in the region. It doesn't necessarily happen, at least not to the extent that what we have been observing recently. We see some sign of kind of sluggishness also in sentiment that makes us very cautious about the future. So consumer confidence have been falling lately. It's not as dynamic as it has been at the beginning of the year. Also, in general, firms see the demand as quite an obstacle for increasing the production capacity, and that means external demand and also like from the domestic pool. And as it has been mentioned, the external environment is quite unstable, if I may say so. A lot of risks. Trump, we are still waiting for the elect Trump to lay out the cards, how the tariffs will look like. That will definitely shape the outlook for 2025, but mostly in 2026. And recently, we have seen some downward revisions for growth of Germany. So there are some clouds that are gathering over 2025, but yet we remain slightly more optimistic about 2025 than we have been so far.
There's the issue of energy, obviously. It's quite expensive in Europe, obviously. Europe is making efforts to move away from Russian energy and is making solid progress, we can say. But there's also a little bit of uncertainty in that regard. And obviously, this impacts the entire region. How would you envisage the impact of the trajectory of these events in terms of economic growth and recovery of the region? Because obviously impacts economic production.
We have seen particularly negative impact in several sectors in the German production. So that's something what's obviously negative for the CEE growth. We see a very strong correlation between performance of German exports and the industrial production in our region. So as long as Germany underperforms, and as long as production in Germany remains sluggish, mainly because of underperformance of the energy sectors, that's a negative factor for our countries and in the region, Poland, Czechia, Hungary, Slovakia also in particular, that are more open and small economies.
And another issue is obviously deficits. Quite a number of countries in the region have solid deficits that they have to address. Do you think that 2025 is going to be the year of perhaps sensible spending, fiscal responsibility?
Well, it depends on the country, obviously. But if we look on Visegrad 4 countries, so Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Czechia and Slovakia already decided to go with fiscal consolidation plans in 2025. Hungary, we still are waiting for more details. There will be parliamentary elections only in 2026, but definitely Prime Minister Orban will need to prepare for that and maybe plan some some spendings also in the budget. And Poland, as we know, does not plan major fiscal consolidation. Part of that is very high defense spending. And the biggest challenge is ahead of Romania, where recent political developments only adds to the fiscal, let's say, instability. And we do not still know how the fiscal consolidation plan and path will look like. But Romania is definitely the most vulnerable country at this point from the fiscal perspective.
And then moving on, I wanted to ask you about the impact of EU funds in our part of Europe. How soon can we expect to see the impact of this money? Because in Poland, we've been hearing for weeks, perhaps even months now, that they will play a significant role in kickstarting investments. And obviously, we need these investments very much, and that they, in turn, will play a significant role in boosting the economy next year.
The best what we can do is to look how the historically EU funds flows looked like, and there was a huge cyclicity. Now we are at the beginning of drawing the EU funds from the new budgeting period, which means 2021-2027, although it's a bit slightly later. And we see and we believe that 2024 was the bottom of the EU funds. So from now on, looking at the cyclicity of the EU funds flow, we expect acceleration. This is also one of the main aspects why we expect economic growth to accelerate slightly in 2025. We believe that investment should bottom out in 2024, and we should see more spending. Poland just received the payment in December, a huge payment. So if that's spent, we really do believe that it will only add up to the growth. So solid still private consumption growth, and then acceleration of the investment due to cyclicality of the EU funds is something what we base our growth story for the region for 2025.
Okay, so you remain quite positive about how this money will impact Poland?
Yes, we do. Still, there is a huge pot of recovery funds. We believe also that that will be spent in the first place. And then there is still Croatia, Hungary, Poland have at least double digits percent of GDP money allocated from the EU in next 7 years. So this is really a strong injection and positive factor for the growth.
Which Central and Eastern European country will be most impacted by the German economic course of events? And I mean, what will happen in the coming year? We have the elections that are due to happen next year. Obviously, the situation politically and economically is very dire. So political instability obviously increases risks, increases uncertainty. Business doesn't like uncertainty, doesn't like risks. If the expectations are solid and well-grounded, we would be more optimistic. For now, the small open economies are obviously the most sensitive. So Czechia, Slovakia, Hungary would be impacted the most. Definitely the struggles of the automotive sector is something of a concern when we look at the prospects of these countries. If the growth is driven by the domestic demand, then Poland probably should outperform also in 2025, if we look only from the perspective of the negative developments in Germany spurring into the region. Okay. And then just as we wrap up, where do you see Poland in 2025? Because in the context of Donald Trump's anticipated protectionist trade policies and the forecast of the country's economic growth, we can have some mixed feelings there. But then on the other hand, what always comes up is the fact that Donald Trump is quite fond of Poland and that perhaps some deals can be struck there.
We still think that the private consumption growth will be positive, that investment will accelerate, and as far as uncertainties regarding the trade are concerned, Poland has quite diversified structure if the trade with the US is looked at, and as opposed to, for example, Slovakia, where 70% of the trade with US goes mostly to vehicles. So if the tariffs hit particularly that sector, then Slovakia would be most exposed. And when we look at Poland, the diversification and the structure of the trade with US makes us a bit more confident that the Poland wouldn't be hit to that extent. Pharmaceutical products are another sector, but these are particularly important for Slovenia or Croatia. Slovenia is the most exposed to as extent as Slovakia is with the vehicles. So it will really depend how the tariffs are designed, whether they are particularly targeted for the sectors or are for the whole economies. So there are still many unknowns, but hopefully in that regards, Poland should do a bit better than the rest of the region.
Okay, Katarzyna Rzentarzewska, it's so great to have you in the studio with us today.
Thank you very much.
And that was Katarzyna Rzentarzewska of Erste Group here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. And make sure you join us every weekday on Business Arena at 5 p.m. CET. Coming up next is World Talks. Goodbye.